He needs no further introduction. Mr. Bob Dylan.
In the early 1960s, a voice would take on responsibility for injustice, war, and inequality. That voice belonged to the musician, songwriter, and cultural icon, Bob Dylan, whose music played a crucial role in advancing the civil rights movement. Dylan's first protest song, A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, was written at the Gaslight Cafe in Greenwich Village. This song was meant to spread awareness to the people about the suffering and tragedy within the world, especially during the tumultuous time of the 1960s. During these times, the United States would become involved with the Vietnam War. Once the draft was announced, controversy sparked across the nation, causing the trust people had in the government to fade and anti-war sentiments to strengthen. Many other struggles citizens faced were based on racism, such as the separation of schools, public buildings, and public transportation. Bob Dylan used his voice during these times to amplify the voices and opinions of those who could not be heard.
In the cultural landscape of the 1960s, Bob Dylan took the responsibility of vocalizing the movement for civil rights within the United States, blending his evocative lyrics with social analysis. Through his anthems of change, not only did he capture the spirit of the civil rights movement, but he also inspired multiple generations to advocate for social justice. Dylan remains a pivotal figure in America's musical history and its ongoing journey for freedom, equality, and truth.
In July 1961, Dylan met 17-year-old Cesar Tollo, who was a member of the Congress of Racial Equality (CORE) office, which raised awareness of segregation. Rotolo filled Dylan in on the ongoing fight for civil rights and gave him the latest news. By the spring of 1961, the Freedom Rides began, which were a series of protest bus trips taken by civil rights activists across the U.S.'s South, arranged by CORE. Dylan's connection with CORE slowly brought more attention to his music. In 1955, Emmett Till, a black American in Mississippi, whistled at a white woman inside of a store. The seemingly harmless interaction led to the murder of Till due to the dangers of racial interaction during the Jim Crow era. The murderous situation were never brought to justice, allowing them to be free. Bob Dylan decided to take initiative and fuel the fire by releasing the Ballad of Emmett Till to shed light to the fact that racism and division was so loud. He influenced his listeners to believe that the country had so much power yet to be found. In 1963, Dylan released his first original studio album titled The Freewheeling Bob Dylan. This album became the first catalyst for change written from Bob's point of view. Many of the songs in the album became anthems for the civil rights movement because of the anti-war themes found within. Dylan decided to take the responsibility of becoming a lead in the fight for civil rights by using his music to amplify the voices of those who could not be heard.
Blown in the Wind was a series of thought-provoking questions asked about the fragile harmony of civilizations and violence, testing the limits of people in modern culture. Dylan's statement, "The answer, my friend, is blown in the wind," suggests that the answers to our questions and problems could be right in front of us, but we just cannot see them. This song was fit to become an anthem for the civil rights movement because the message contained within perfectly encapsulated the yearning that many had for peace, justice, and equality. Blown in the Wind recognized the potential of the U.S. yet to be found, echoing similar themes from the Ballad of Emmett Till. Masters of War was another protest song that Bob Dylan created for the movement. During the time of the song's release, the U.S. was involved in many conflicts throughout the world. Through Masters of War, he accused the figures with high social standing for being cold-hearted and detached from the consequences that came from their actions, and being responsible for the war that citizens across the world had to endure. Dylan's message was clear. War should not be blamed on those that are following orders, but those who treat them as puppets.
Although many supported Dylan, there were some that still held onto their outdated and segregationist views. Eventually, the tension boiled over between the two sides, leading to the 1963 Birmingham church bombing that killed 4 African American girls and injured 23 others. This event represented the depravity within the United States government systems and the unspeakable acts of racial violence across the country. The perpetrators' goal with the bombing was to try and slow down the momentum from the March on Washington. However, the incident only brought activists like Bob Dylan closer together, strengthening their determination to fight for equality and justice and to honor the ones they lost in the bombing. Through the beginnings of Dylan's career, he promoted his contrarian views through his folk music, just like his idol Woody Guthrie. Folk music's goal is to preserve history and promote thoughts of peace, love, and justice. During the 1965 Newport Folk Festival, Dylan decided to step forward in his career by lifting his Stratocaster and played the song Like a Rolling Stone. He talks about someone who once held significant social power and is now facing the consequences of their actions, losing their reputation and connections and being in the shoes of a minority during the Jim Crow era. While there were inevitably people who were against the turn away from traditional folk music, Dylan proved that his message was not confined to certain genres, marking a point which showed that civil change could be expressed through music regardless of style.
Through the immoral and one-sided laws in the early 1960s, Bob Dylan's goal was to spread awareness to citizens about the current events that were taking place in the civil rights movement. Dylan understood the responsibility he took on ever since his first political song, A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. Bob Dylan stood apart from other activists because of his ability to gather a sense of community for all citizens fighting for social reform. Dylan's lyrics incorporated literary and poetic influences, challenging the structure of pop music. His songs often had multiple interpretations, allowing listeners to relate to their own concerns, yet sharing his honest truth about the state of America. When starting in the folk music industry, his songs often criticized those in power and the abuses they committed, yet he stood tall, unfazed by the possible consequences it could have to speak such strong opinions during these times. Dylan's music reached a wide audience because he was part of the ethnic majority, making his message more accessible to those who might not have been informed about current conflicts. This allowed for a much wider audience to listen to his music while also highlighting the change needed, shown by the discrimination that could be even seen within his own listeners. Dylan's music empowered the movement, playing an important role in ending the Jim Crow era by reshaping the public opinion.
Bob Dylan originally created his songs to help push the civil rights movement forward. However, many of them have evolved into anthems for other causes such as climate change and protests against current-day governments. Dylan used his music as a tool for social change by speaking out on political injustices in the United States. And as the decades have passed, his mindset has inspired many to act and advocate for change in their communities. Masters of War was originally written for conflicts concerning the Vietnam War. However, it has been repurposed for many situations since then, as his words resonate with those who feel suppressed by the corruption of their government. Civilians have continued to use Masters of War for the conflicts they have faced because the lyrics serve as a source of inspiration, capturing their anger and determination to stand up against injustice.
In 2012, Bob Dylan was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the highest civilian awards granted, in recognition of his progressive political influence through his lyrics. This award is given out to those that have made significant contributions to the nation's interests. In Dylan's case, the music that he created was the reason for the prize because of how impactful it was to the progression of civil rights. 4 years later, Bob Dylan made history as the first musician to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature due to his unparalleled ability of blending artistry and activism. Through these acknowledgments and achievements, his work reached many other up-and-coming artists, such as Madonna, David Bowie, Hozier, the Beatles, and the Velvet Underground. They were all inspired by Bob Dylan's initiative to create a change in the modern world.
Protest songs act as anthems of resistance, rebellion, and revolution. Bob Dylan redefined what fighting for freedoms looked like. He analyzed the events that occurred in the United States and noticed the divisions that were found within society. Many were not able to express what they felt, so Dylan spread their thoughts through his music to help bring their ideas to a wider audience. His music was one of the key factors that helped to motivate people to stand up for what they believed in, encouraging them to challenge the injustices around them. From the marches of the 1960s to the fights occurring in the present day, Dylan has supported and directed the opinions of many throughout his life. Bob Dylan spread the fact that all songs do not only tell stories, but also represent legacies that we stand for, in our generation and the many to come.